made that mistake.
We didn't do it last time?
No, two episodes ago.
What's
I'm just going to
Oh
keep
happening?
my
no.
phone plugged in so I've got a good charge.
I think for some reason when you plugged it in, it started making weird noises.
But it's fine now. No, it went away.
It made a doody-doot sort of noise saying that I connected. That was all. Is it still good?
It's like making a weird humming
A hum,
noise.
yeah.
All right, I'll take it off. Hopefully it won't die and this thing won't
That's
drain.
weird. How much battery do you have?
Oh, it's full. But
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
know, not having done this, I didn't know what kind of drain it would have.
Yeah, if
running
it
the whole time.
comes to it, then just we'll do it with a little bit of hum, and then I can take it out in post, and it'll be fine.
Okay.
I'm avoiding that the
now.
chance of it sounding shitty pretty much.
Yeah, that's fine. Good deal.
Okay.
All right, so now that
Now
that we had that whole thing on live, we pressed the button just as that happened. I don't know.
Perfect timing.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's good.
Welcome to From the Ground Up, whatever number. Obviously, we never introduce ourselves. This is Joe and Melissa.
Are we gonna do that? We're gonna have like a new radio intro.
Oh.
This is From the Ground Up podcast with your hosts, Joe and Melissa.
I mean, I didn't say it like that. You made it weird. I just was noticing, like, you never say your names.
Yeah, that is a thing, right? I don't think a lot of people on YouTube more so, maybe they realize that my name is Joe.
Yeah, they don't realize that my name's Melissa. So I feel like I need to announce it every so often.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be good, like, practice for business, like a good business practice to be like,
my name's Melissa.
My name's Joe. My name's Melissa, so that people actually know who the hell you are.
Not just Theportcitypythons.
Yeah, but whatever. You know where we are. If you're listening to this right now, you know where we are.
Long intro.
You can check us out on portcitypythons.com.
That's what we do in the outro. What do you do?
We have t-shirts and animals available, as well as some cocoa products. And we will see a lot of you guys in Tinley. If you're going to Tinley.
Not we.
Oh, I will see a lot of you guys in Tinley. If you guys are headed to Tinley, hit us up. Maybe we'll have to do like a Tinley roll call type thing and meet a bunch of people.
Yes.
And that's pretty much it. Do we have anything else to say? Amazon links, description, whatever. You know what to do by now.
Yes. Introduce our guest.
So today's guest is Chris Montross from Darkhorse Herpetoculture. And Chris works with all different kinds of North American Colubrids, and he kind of explained it just before. The stuff that you find in your backyard is pretty much what he's interested in. So, Chris, if you could give us a little intro of what you work with.
Hey guys, pretty much mostly working with locality rat snakes and water snakes. Just a few kings mixed in there, but just really like to see all the natural variety of rats and such found, mostly in the eastern half of the U.S., but there's some nice ones ranging a little farther west as well.
So how'd you kind of first get involved with reptiles in general?
As I understand it from my folks, when I was a little kid still in the stroller, I wasn't able to be pulled out of a little herp house up in New York, and didn't want to leave, and apparently it's been a bit of a bug since then. Just a lifelong fascination overall.
So I think we realized that we grew up very close to each other. So you grew up in Beacon?
Yeah, I lived there as a little kid. My parents we moved away at the end of the 70s, but I was that's where we moved away from, and it was actually Bear Mountain Zoo was where the little herp house was, and I can still picture it, but don't really remember it, I guess, as my parents had described me being unwilling to leave, so to speak, from the herp house there. Just a little wooden room with a handful of little glass cages in the walls. But yeah, just up there in the Hudson Valley, and the extended family still up there farther up the creek, so to speak, in that area, except for my folks and stuff. We all moved down to the south in Florida.
Mm-hmm. So that was really, growing up, it's like the only significant snakes that you could find. Like the black rat snake is like such a crazy species to find out in the wild, as far as it's the only like large colubrid out there. And then also you have the Nerodia. So is that kind of where you got that from?
I don't remember too much of snakes because I was pretty young when we moved to Florida. I think I was about to turn 6, so other than knowing that we had a garter hibernaculum at the house, and my dad moving them consistently over the fence into the back hillside. Most of my herp exposure and growing up was all in Central Florida, pretty much as I remember of it.
And now, when did you start captive keeping and breeding?
I started. I remember I did a lot of aquariums, like fish and stuff, when I was in elementary school in the early 80s and mid 80s and stuff. And that kind of transitioned as I was able to get away with it to snakes and well, lizards and box turtles and stuff like that in the mid 80s. And then a buddy I went to school with who was in the Boy Scouts, and through the Boy Scouts, he ended up becoming a member of the Central Florida Herp Society. And as soon as I learned about it, I ended up joining in on that, and it's been pretty much a downhill slope since then, so to speak. Kind of introduced me to a world that didn't seem realistic on the whole, so been pretty hooked with it ever since.
Well, and also just talking about like unrealistic as far as the herp community, the particular one that you were in Florida is obviously huge. Like, who were some people that you were exposed to as a kid?
Oh gosh, I mean, guys like Wayne Hill, the National Reptile Breeders Expo. That actually kind of spawned out from our big auction we had every year, and he and the club started that, and he ended up taking it over years later after I'd moved up here to Alabama. But guys like that, and George Van Horn was in the area, and there's a lot of other guys that are turtle guys and other guys. Peter Pritchard lived in the town where I went to middle school and high school and stuff like that. So there's a lot of people. Dennis Ulrich, big turtle breeder down there in Kissimmee vicinity. Yeah, I knew him when I was a kid too. So there's a lot of people that I got to meet. Some of the guys, I spent some time volunteering in the herp house at Central Florida Zoo towards the end of high school and stuff before I left college. So there's a lot of people. It's a big herp area down there. Back then, it wasn't. It was just a herp club that was the main thing, that existed before all these shows and the internet and all that kind of stuff. So it was the main connection for everybody then.
How prevalent were like captive breeding at that point and the industry in quotes?
Yeah, it really not a lot. Most of it still back then was heavy dealer related, acquisitions and stuff like that. There definitely were people breeding. I used to get to go to, I used to help. My father used to take me down to Winter Haven and help. Wayne Hill used to organize all the League of Florida Herp Societies newsletter, and we used to go down there with some regularity later in high school and help collate, put those together, label them, get them ready for mailing and stuff. And usually, if I went, I was usually able to go over and visit his facility. And that time, it was pretty much all snakes. He hadn't gotten in all the turtles and tortoises that he has shifted to these days, but got to see a lot of cool stuff back then, and he was breeding a lot of that stuff back at that point. So there was definitely happening. It just wasn't happening anything like it is nowadays. That was really kind of at the point where stuff was taking off and the first shows were happening and people were learning from each other as to how to be successful doing that sort of thing. Most of it seemed more by chance than anything else, but there were a lot of people that were doing a good job back then. Guys like Eugene Bissett was up in Gainesville, and the Brants at Gourmet Rodent were breeding a good bit at that time too. So it was a lot of it going on. It just still was a heavy dealer related industry at that point.
Yeah, now you must have been on the forefront, obviously, of all the exotics imported into Florida and stuff like that. Like,
sure.
were you seeing crazy things coming in?
Oh yeah, I mean you get to see everything. I mean, and of course my fantasy, aside from was back then, was really keeping those exotic things. It wasn't the banded water snakes that I hiked around going snake hunting for growing up, and those sort of things, and the yellow rats crossing the road and all those kind of things. Those things back then. It was all the crazy stuff that would show up. Our herp meetings were like a huge buy and sell thing every month. And so you had a lot of opportunity to see great stuff without even having to go anywhere but to the meetings. And so, you just got to see everything from all the rare Asian box turtles back then to, gosh, everything. I mean, I remember seeing things like, hellbenders and all sorts of crazy stuff people would show up with down there. It was like a cornucopia. I'd save all my money every month and go there and see what I could end up getting my hands on. It was like, it was like Christmas. It was like the big expos, ultimately became in the early days. And so, it was definitely getting to go to some of the importers back then too. It was very eye-opening as to how that end of the industry functioned, as well as, it was like getting a candy shop, of course, and being able to have access to stuff much more affordable than, what I had access to through pet shops and other venues, growing up. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, no. Was CITES already a thing
Oh
at that
yeah,
point?
yeah, it was. There were plenty of species, but the thing with Florida is so many people kept stuff down there that there was a lot of these species you could all keep. And you still can down there. There's a lot of species because people had them for so many years in those areas. You could have a lot of these captive bred animals within state lines. So, we saw everything. I mean, everybody had whatever they wanted to some extent. And obviously we know through all the different books of the dealer, published about the dealers and stuff, the day down back then, that there was lots of sketchy stuff going on, and that kind of thing. But not at the level that I was at. Of course, I never saw any of that kind of stuff because I wasn't a big guy in that. I go in and buy a few frogs or some other random stuff when I had chances, or some basilisks or something cool like that. But never the high dollar stuff that these guys are getting in trouble for.
Yeah, yeah, smuggling in Fiji iguanas and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Most of those guys, I got to meet them back then, like Crutchfield stuff. He was always a nice guy to me, always very generous to me and stuff like that, but it's a tempting field back in Florida, and some people think they're in the right and the government says they're not. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though that our industry has built a strong base on things like bearded dragons, that he
Right,
first brought in from Australia. And
right.
despite the legality of it, they are
Sure.
probably more captive bred here than probably
In
anywhere else.
Australia.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of those species like that. The origins of those original specimens probably highly in question. Whether they came in through Europe or otherwise, or somebody's suitcase. There's lots of stories out there on how all those species showed up. But, it's all history at this point. On the whole, they're things like beardies are well established and loved by everybody. So it's been nothing but a good thing for the whole, and gotten people away from all the iguanas and stuff of the day back, years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's a crazy thing. The amount of $2 iguanas coming in from Belize. I forget the
Oh yeah,
numbers, but it's like over like in the
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of iguanas.
Wow.
yeah. The volumes that used to come through. One dealer I used to get to go through with an acquaintance. It was kind of a middleman kind of guy. It was Robert Sands down in the Tampa area, and he had some farms apparently down in one of the countries, Belize, El Salvador, I don't know where, and just getting to see the thousands of babies that he had come in, all at once, and all these things, all these big runs, greenhousey runs is amazing, but you don't see that because it's been replaced with the leopards and the beardies and all the other more manageable, nicer species than those. I mean, obviously with the morphs, the iguanas are taking a bit of a pickup in interest, obviously, but I think the price and prior knowledge has kept them from being too popular, at least I hope.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how it's shifted as far as I remember even in the 90s going to things like White Plains, and there were so many
Yeah.
frilled dragons, green
Oh yeah.
basilisks, and
Yep.
different things like sailfin dragons, things that you don't see
Yep.
anymore. Because I
No,
mean,
it's hard. It's hard to find a lot of those guys, and it just comes down to they don't make good pets, so to speak. And so because they don't make good pets, a lot of the guys doing any sort of volume breeding got away from them. I mean, like one of
That
my
makes
hands down
sense.
favorite herps that there is the Basilisk genus. I mean, basilisks are like my hands down favorite. I've worked with almost all of them in the past, and but at the same time, there's no market for them, so it's a real hard thing to want to work with because those things reproduce pretty relevant, pretty productively, and it makes it difficult to find outlets for them. It might be easier now with social media, but it doesn't fit into my lifestyle at the moment. So I don't have, I don't have them. Although I imagine if one or two species came into my grasp, I probably would cave in and make it happen somehow.
No, I mean, and just animals like that require so much space. Were you able to kind of experiment with, I mean, living in Florida, were you able to experiment with outdoor caging and stuff like that?
Most of that stuff, although I did have the common striped basilisks while I was young, in Florida, like through high school and stuff, but I didn't really start keeping them avidly until I'd moved up here to Alabama, and so I never did any outdoor enclosures with those guys. It was all just big walk-in enclosures in a back room. Just kind of walked in. There were several big door sets that were, you went into each enclosure and they were ceiling to floor enclosures, with big pools and pumps, and it was a lot. I set them up. Most of my stock was all wild caught, fresh from importers in South Florida, and so they got a lot of room and a lot of privacy, and I didn't really see them, and I mostly heard them. But wish I could do it again, but it just doesn't fit in the lifestyle. Like I said, at the moment, I can't make room for that. With, as you can maybe hear in the background, some barking. My wife and I have quite a few dogs that we raise and show, so it tends to take up that space.
Understandable. I mean, I remember not being successful with a lot of animals, like back in the day, imported animals and stuff that you used to get. I mean,
sure. Everybody had failures back then because of the state of the health of those guys more than everything, and lack of knowledge of husbandry. It was all a wing it and hope you lucked out and it would work more than anything.
Yeah. You're happy you got your hands on it at the same time.
Sure. That's really what it was back then, and it took quite a few years of people that really stuck to some of those species to understand what they needed. And now we, can get involved with these various species a little bit more knowledgeably and successfully, and not have the mortality rates that, that we saw decades ago. So it's, definitely come a long way. It's amazing to me just what I've got to see since I got into it in the mid to late 80s to now where herp is, where herps in general is. Really, it's amazing.
What do you think the biggest difference is from there to now?
I think just available information. I think where everybody can access information, even though there's obviously plenty of naive and overexploited information on some of the stuff, where somebody just had one and they go and publish up a bunch of stuff on the internet, and people get access to that and think that's the token answer. But there's a lot of there was a lot of people that really made treadway on a lot of species over the years that don't necessarily get the credit for a lot of things, and some real pioneers that either aren't around or aren't doing the same things anymore because they needed to shift with markets, or whatever the case may be, or just interests changed. I mean, I don't work with anything what I used to work with years ago. I was much more strictly tropical years ago. All the tropical stuff was fascinating, whether it be Amazons or whatever. And having worked in the zoo field for a long time, it allowed me to have access to pretty much anything to learn about and work with. And so I got to experience and be successful and fail at a lot of cross section of herpetoculture in general.
Being someone who was a part of the snake world before, we had this fast access to information, i.e. being the internet, Are you someone who kind of shies away from it, or you're really into it?
Are you, as far as the overall information that's out there?
Or just internet?
It seems like there's like two camps. It's either, some people are like Facebook people, some people shy away from it very intensely.
I play both sides of it pretty adamantly. I have found that I stayed off Facebook forever until a few years ago. My wife and I kind of decided that with our showing and stuff with our dogs, that we kind of wanted to start a kennel page, so to speak, and didn't really want to do a website because I'm just not that tech savvy and wanted to deal with that in any capacity. So, of course, wanting to do a kennel page, I had to get a personal page, and then once I kind of got into with all my friends that I already had with herps and Facebook, it is kind of the main reason why I'm on Facebook more than anything. And then realized that I was able to, because I had taken a couple breaks on and off over the years of even keeping anything, and I had gained a pretty good tight group of folks here in the Southeast, through the North American Field Herpers Association. Once I was able to get on social media with these guys and be able to share and exchange information, finds and all that good stuff, I realized that I was able to find people with niche interests, that kind of lined up with me, and or I could just find niche interest even if I wasn't keeping them, and be able to keep up with what's going on with stuff. I mean, I'm on Basilisk pages just because I love Basilisk. Granted, almost everything on there is overseas in Europe, but because most of that's interest has faded away in this country. But it's allowed me to find people that love water snakes and love rat snakes and whatever else. And I don't, I can find those people that aren't into the. I can find the people that are that don't think that the whole world is herp market is just morphs and albinos and stuff. I can find the guys that like the stuff we find in our backyard, so to speak.
Yeah, there's
everybody's backyards, different backyards from all over the region.
There's someone out there for every
yeah,
snake on
because it's like there's
Facebook.
such a everyone has a voice, and sometimes that's a bad thing. But if
Absolutely.
if you have a interest in a niche thing, if I was a ball python guy, I would probably never be on Facebook. But if I'm on if I'm on the black rat snake group, there's much less shenanigans there, and you can
Sure.
if you're able to filter out who's legit and who's not, you can do that pretty quickly.
Yeah. And some of it just comes into so gotten to a point in my life where I don't have to respond, and I don't have to comment, and I don't have to do all those things with all that silly nilly stuff that's out there. I may pipe in here and there when I find it's appropriate, but I try to stay out of the drama that is out there so much in Facebook world. Try to just keep it to the point for the most part, and not be a know-it-all, and not because we all don't know it all. We all have some information to share here and there, and we can help each other out from time to time, but there's a lot of people that know more than every one of us out there, and there's plenty that really enjoy and go out of their way to share information with each other, more so than maybe what I do, unless I'm directly doing it with an individual, so to speak. At least in the public format, for me, I don't like to do it that way as much.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, everything now I feel like is very cooperative as far as, breeders trying to breed things, kind of keep things. For what I've heard, some old school people would kind of keep like trade secrets. Was that more prevalent back then?
Yeah. Sure, absolutely. Everything was cutthroat, to have something have something that other people didn't, and and be successful where other people aren't. Sure, it was. And I mean, it's still out there to some extent, but enough, we've learned enough of the basics to be successful with all these guys. The colubrids on the grand scheme of things aren't all that different from one another when it comes to cycling them and keeping them healthy enough to reproduce. And we're all always learning new tricks when it comes to getting finicky babies going, and stuff like that. But I don't find a week that I'm not learning something. I can't say every day as far as when it comes to my herbs, because some days work doesn't let me spend too much time in that capacity. But there's always stuff to learn, and in turn sharing it with folks, and I try to do that with folks that end up getting any of my surplus babies and stuff. Is if I can tell that they're not super deep into herps and super experienced, I try to give them tidbits that I can to make sure that they're successful. It's only gonna I guess it's only gonna make me look better if I'm helping them out, and I want them to be successful in anything they're getting from me, any of my guys, because I put a lot of effort into mine as it is, so I want them to not have any troubles as best as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's super important, especially because obviously you want people to be successful, because I mean, I don't know people who are exactly working with what you're working with. Like, why do you think that these things have been somewhat overlooked as far as water snakes and even, black rat snakes?
I mean, a lot of it ends up being just, people's experiences with them have just been in the wild, in their yards while they're fishing, while they're herping, while they're road cruising, whatever the case may be. And water snakes have a terrible reputation for being just irascible and bitey and stuff. But most of them, particularly like some of the ones that I like working with the most, which are the fasciata subspecies and mangroves and stuff. A lot of these guys, once you get past that initial defensive behavior from these guys, they really become just like amazingly tractable and really easygoing to work with. And there's obviously variations, just like there is with others, from one to one, and one individual to the next. But I actually find most of my water snakes to be a much more laid back group of animals than by all means any king snakes I keep, and probably a good portion of my rat snakes. I
Really?
can go in there and open a tub to any of my bandids and stuff, man, and they're just coming right out expecting to be fed, and they'll come right out of my arms, and then I'm not getting eaten up by them and stuff like I do with any of the king snakes that I open up. They're gonna come right on and latch onto you in a heartbeat. So
That's interesting. So I don't really know anyone who keeps water snakes in any type of
Not
legitimate
at all.
capacity. So how do you even
Yeah,
keep water snakes?
man, I keep them just like I do my rats and kings. Really, no different. Exactly the same thing, except for, I guess, because they're not climbers and constrictors, I don't have to worry about the top of the cage quite as bad as I need to worry about, keeping my rats and kings, especially in. Uh, I'm not into the drawer systems and stuff, mostly because I'm a cheap ass and don't want to spend the money or put the time into building a big drawer system. I tend to like a little bit deeper tubs where I can put some branches in for my guys and let them get off the substrate and, you know, get up off the ground and I won't quite say bask because they really don't have that true opportunity the way I set them up, but at least just get off the ground, have different opportunities to stretch your legs, work their muscles and those sort of things. But on the whole, the water snakes are, just in big 60 something quart tubs with branches and hides and maybe a little bit bigger water bowl than some of the rat snakes and stuff have. But, they're set up exactly the same. Essentially really just no different.
Now, do
And they
they
really need that. They need that to be successful with them. I mean, they don't really tolerate high water environments and moist environments.
really? So, I mean,
Yeah,
because obviously you always see them basking on a log or something and in and
sure,
around the water, but you don't see
sure.
that they're very aquatic in captivity.
They will utilize it. The problem is in captivity, the way we're setting them up, they don't have the same airflow that they do outside. Um, if you actually were to pay attention to them outside, they don't spend a lot of time in the water. They're spending time to actually go hunt, and they're spending time to flee from a predator situation. They're not just hanging out in the water. They're basking, they're sitting up in the bank, they're up in a burrow hole in the bank, whatever. They may be cruising from one place to the other in the water and are hunting for in the water, but they if you spend any time working with them, you'll realize if you keep them in a moist environment, you're going to get blister disease pretty quick and have a good chance of losing your animals. So keeping them dry is really important.
Now, talking about the hunting, I mean, it seems like they would be eating a lot of fish and frogs and stuff like that. What do you feed them in captivity, and is it hard to get them feeding on rodents?
I do primarily do rodents for a couple of different reasons, and um, depending on species, it's different. Some are much easier, usually after just a meal or two of getting them to eat whatever they're willing to take, whether it be fish or frog. Um, I can get them over onto a scented hairless rodent much on a dime. It doesn't usually within just a few meals. Most of them are taking them, and I've had some take a scented rodent right off the bat, and then within you know usually a few months, once they kind of get conditioned to the life, to me feeding them and getting food from me, I don't even have to scent them anymore. They're just happy to come and get food right from me. I mean, I do use some fish here and there, and cycle it in. For various reasons. I mean, it's mostly just muscle meat, so they're not getting much more than protein out of the situation. But um, rodents are just a good complete diet that really pack on the weight well and hold the weight well. You don't have to feed them as often because of it. In the wild, they're feeding a lot more frequently on the fish and frogs because those break down a lot quicker. And that gets to be, dare I say, inconvenient in captivity to try to keep up with all that and feed them often enough and feed them enough fish. And then you have the whole issue of, the fish and frogs are good vectors for parasites, and so once I've kind of got my guys deparasitized, I ideally don't want to introduce anymore if I can help it,
Yeah, so I guess that's the next question. Like, where would you source frogs and/or fish from, and what kind of fish or frogs would you use?
Yeah, so that's the thing. I mean, initially when I first, acquire some new water snakes, be it I collected them or whatever the case may be, which is usually the case in the water snakes. I just go find a stream, swamp somewhere nearby, and just get my hands on them. I fortunately do have some bronze frogs that tend to live in my water garden, so I do have a occasional source for them there. But I can usually find some places around here, and once I get them eating, then it's easy peasy. They're usually really willing to go. They're really actually really easygoing, tractable animals. For the most part. Some species not so much. I tend to work more with the bandeds and the mangroves than anything because I've grown to really like their personalities and their hardiness more so. I mean, I do have some browns and I've got some midlands, and I've parted way with a few species and failed at other species, and for every reason under the book, who knows? One species I stopped working with plain bellies because I was struggling with the offspring. I couldn't get them off fish. I couldn't get the babies off fish, but yet I could catch a wild caught juvenile and get it on a scented pinky in no time. So I've found the bandits and the mangroves, once established, are great, and the babies are pretty darn hardy and easy going, which makes it easy for people to take interest in them as well. And I can share what I enjoy.
Are you freezing the frogs and stuff like that beforehand, or are you feeding them?
I do if I have to continue feeding them. It kind of depends in the beginning. In the beginning, I just want the water snakes to eat. And that's my only goal. I haven't dewormed them or done anything at that point with them. I just want them to be willing to take food in captivity. Once I get them willing to take food in captivity, it's all downhill from there. They're usually pretty willing to go from there, and then as soon as I start, getting them to eat regularly and get deworming going, then I'll go with just, I usually keep a few frozen frogs in the freezer for scenting if I need it in a dime, and I used to do seasonally, I'll go out and catch large volumes of gambusia and freeze those. But I've kind of now gotten hooked on the lazy way of going and buying tilapia from the Walmart and stripping that up to get some of these little guys going. Excuse me, if they can't get on the pinks right off the bat. So it saved me a little time having to run down to some local swamps and dipping stuff and sifting them out and bagging them up and freezing them up and going through all that whole rigmarole. So it is doesn't, fortunately, tilapia is reasonably affordable, but it doesn't have a good odor. I found that so it doesn't quite draw the same interest that some other fish species do, like bluegill and gambusia and stuff like that. They tend to have a little bit more odorous fish smell, and tilapia's got almost no fish smell. So I've kind of noticed a little lack of response is switching over to using that. But it's definitely made it easy. Strip them up into whatever size pieces those different water snake babies need to get them going, so I can get them onto pinks as soon as they're able to, size-wise. Because some of these guys are just too small to get even on a small pink right off the bat. Just like the garter snake guys, have to deal with too.
Really, I didn't know that they kind of started off that small. So, how small are you talking for a baby?
Like baby midlands and like northern water snakes, man, those guys are tiny, man. Just a couple of inches and couldn't take a day old pink if they're like depending on it. It usually takes a good handful of meals, and I have had some banded water litters that, and mangrove litters last year. At least one of my two mangrove litters last year were those babies were too small to take pinks for a good little while. I had to go wait a couple of months before I could get them on, and at that point I was mostly just using thawed gambusia on them, and they took it eagerly. And once they got big enough, I got to move on to pinks, that sort of thing. So worked pretty easy.
That's crazy. That's something that I didn't really consider, especially being like I tend to think corn snakes are about as small as they can get
Oh
sometimes.
no, man! Baby corn snakes are great, man. I mean, they're way easier than dealing it. Think of something about the same, maybe even maybe the same diameter as a small corn, but cut the thing in half lengthwise. I mean, just
Wow.
midlands are little teeny things, just like baby garters, which I do keep a few garters. They're teeny, man. These things are just itty bitty when they're born. You know, some species of garters obviously have much bigger babies, you know, but Easterns don't seem to by any means. They get tiny little things when they're born. Fortunately, the waters are a little bit bigger, but the bandits have nice sized babies. Mangroves have reasonably nice sized babies as well. So browns and diamondbacks, all those guys have pretty reasonable sized babies. So most of those guys are pretty easy to get onto pinks and sometimes even bigger, you know, right off the bat.
Now, is the cycling similar to your other colubrid species?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, I've already started throwing stuff and cooling them down over the past couple of weeks and stuff that didn't breed this season either because they just didn't go for whatever reason, or they weren't ready because they were newer wild-caught acquisitions last year, and or you know whatever reasons. I've already started cooling some down. I've got water snakes in there, got king snakes in there, I've got rat snakes in there. In fact, just before we got online here, I just threw two more pairs of rat snakes into the fridge to cool down, and we'll be adding more in the next week or two. Basically, all the stuff that didn't breed, I'm getting them in on an early cycle right now, and then I'll follow the other ones in afterwards as I can fit them in. As I can fit them in.
I didn't know rat
So are
snakes
you
go
kind of
now.
staggering off a little bit? Because we obviously put everything down at the same time, but
right, yeah, it's when I started getting back into keeping colubrids a handful of years ago. I was kind of trying to just go with cool the whole room down concept. My buddies that I breed a lot of my rat snakes with, he just cools all his babies down. Just his whole building just gets cooled down all at once, and it's all climate controlled. And so I started doing that. But with him living near on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains, 7 hours north of me, it's a little easier for him. He basically is trying to keep them from getting too cold. Whereas for me, our temperatures fluctuate here so much in central Alabama that the first year was okay. It worked pretty well. And then I was having hit or miss, and last year was just such a terrible winter for us that like my guys didn't cycle well. I had some babies that I lost that I shouldn't have just because they were staying too warm and staying too active and burning too much fat, and but yet I'm trying to not feed them because it's not warm enough to do that. So I did some working on trying to get what I could and talking to my buddy that I worked with on some of this, and scrounged up a nice big fridge off a neighbor and a little bit of fancy wiring help from my friend, and got myself a fridge set up that I could adjust the temperature to where I needed it to be, and instead of what the fridge would let me put it at. So now I just have X amount of space to work with, and there's not enough room to put all the stuff I cooled down at once in there. So starting to stagger it now, and I think it'll actually work better. It'll keep me from being so overloaded all at the same time of the year. If it works. First time I'm technically trying it, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
but I think it's plenty of other people out there do stagger their stuff year round. I mean, this past winter, you're seeing people's king snakes hatching out in January. It's like, well, obviously they cool those guys down in the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, and that window in order to be having stuff hatching that early. So I think some of them are doing it for timing to get to the shows and stuff like that, trying to get their stuff up and out as early as possible. For me, it's just getting stuff cycled properly and having enough space to do it, in the right space. And now I can keep my young ones up and awake and keep them on a feeding schedule with just a little space heater in our room, just as needed based on thermal cycles here in this area.
I think that's so. It's cool to have something like that because we obviously, when we were in Texas, really struggled with getting it down cold enough,
right.
And then it would swing, and the temperature would swing all the time.
Yep, and that's basically where I got with last year, and just got so mad at it that I was like, I gotta change it, and so did some working on it this past, well, I guess it would have been right before winter last year, and it made it work. Got it going, got it set up. A friend showed me which thermostat I needed to make happen. He was in the electrical field and showed me which YouTube videos had it. Actually, some herp guys actually had the same thermostat, showed me how to wire it up right so that I could bypass the thermostat, so to speak, on the fridge and stuff, and I can set it right where I need it or change it if I so care to as well. So seems to be working. I just wish, I had like 4 of them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wishes they had more of something in their collection.
Sure, absolutely.
As far as
More of them just means that much I just don't have the time for anyway. So its limitations are always good, even if it's unwillingly forced on you.
Yeah, and it's like the way the market works, especially with colubrids. I don't know if Python guys understand as much, but with the colubrids, everyone's hashing out at the same time, and
Sure.
so all your competition has stuff, and then you sell out, and then it's tax time, and everyone's buying things. So it's like, damn, I wish I still had babies now, but
yeah, it's interesting because then you have pinky shortage supplies when you're trying to buy pinkies. I ran into that and had to go back to a previous, supplier that I had left because I had no choice. Things like that. It's all out there, and so, fortunate with me, I tend to be a bit obsessive because a lot of the stock I work with is either stock I'm getting from my close friend that I breed with rat snakes from his collection from that he has built of North American rat snakes from over 30 years, and other stuff that I've fresh collected and brought in from localities that I want to work with and people aren't working with and stuff. And so I tend to be obsessive about holding back stock. And so, I tend to come late winter, tend to go through and have stuff available kind of when some of the different cycles of people wanting stuff. I go, yeah, I really don't need 3 pairs of those. I can let go this pair. I can maybe let go 2 pairs. That sort of stuff. I tend to keep them back just to watch their colors develop, particularly with the water snakes, and just so that I always have at least some backup from that particular, stock and locality, and make sure that I don't lose it, because that was lessons learned years ago with exotics. You go and spend, a couple $100 or whatever on some, southern white-lip python, and you scrounge up, the money and find the availability of a second one. Well, if you lose one, well, now you're screwed. Because getting your hands on one and saving up the money to get another one, well, fortunately with me, my interest allows me to go out in the field and find what I want, or get with good friends that are out there and get stock from them. But I try to at least have, it's best I can, at least have 2 pairs of everything around, and if not, even have some offspring sitting in the background too, just as backups. Stuff happens, failures happen, whether it be just husbandry issues or, as everybody runs it, I've known plenty of guys that have, electricity issues, heating failures, all these sort of things. A good friend of mine had a bad failure last year and lost over half his collection, and it was pretty devastating because he had stuff that he got for me, and he had a lot of rare stuff. I say rare in the capacity of, lineage and bloodline wise, not, like use, some anthill pythons or some other, stuff that, is harder to get your hands on, but, rare species that aren't in captivity, rare localities that aren't in captivity and stuff like that. So, it's pretty devastating for him, and reassured why I try to keep backups of stuff, and as well as know where some of my harder to come by localities and species and stuff, I know where they're at. I keep a list of everything I sell to people, mostly just so I know where they went, or if they come back and get some more from me, I know exactly what I've sent with them from which pairs or whatever the case may be. I can make sure that they get unrelated ones or whatever. I just write down what's gone out the door to certain people so that I can relay back to that and try to keep up with where some particularly certain things like my Slinsky rats and stuff like that, I can try to keep up with where they're at, that sort of thing.
Ooh, Zelensky's.
Yeah. So you find that a lot of the people who are getting your animals, are they like hardcore locality guys, or some people are just whatever, I want a pet, or are there other people?
More the locality and niche interest guys, especially with the rat snakes, because everything I have at this point now is all locality. I don't have anything. I purged all my Florida King morphs I'd ended up through with trades and stuff like that. I got rid of them over the winter last year and the spring, and just purified myself just to locality Florida Kings and stuff like that.
Purified.
And just got rid of just recently traded out my pair of Pueblans that I had taken in on a trade from a buddy that I figured I kept them on and off over the years and never bred them. I was like, what the heck, I'll keep them. I bred them twice, or I guess twice now, and I had a buddy that wanted to let go of a few things that I just had to have, and I started throwing things out. I was like, you can have Pueblans, you can have this, you can have that, and so I was really grateful to get what I got, and he was excited to get my baby Pueblans and my adults, and I can't even remember what else I sent him, but a bunch of other stuff. I'll let go of pretty much anything to get fox snakes in my hand. So
No,
But that was my last generics I think I have, if anything at all, as far as not tight knit locality stuff.
Now you kind of alluded to heat a little bit, but are you keeping kind of an ambient situation?
Yeah, I use ambient and utilizing my window opening and closing. Like now, I'm closing it at night, opening it up, depending on when my wife or I gets home. When I'm still going there and pop the window open a little ways to let the heat once it warms up, because we're getting down into the night times are dropping 68, 72 window, and I don't want the room dropping quite that low, so I just shut it down before I go to bed and traps those upper 70, low 80 heats in there until one of us can pop the window, even if it's later in the afternoon when we get home, whatever the case may be. But and then just use a space heater as needed during the winter months for the babies. Just kind of, I'm not one. I've known too many people have fire issues and all those sort of things, and bad electrical scares, that I don't run it when I'm not home. Just I come home and kick it on, and I just moderate it that way. And if the room's not staying warm enough, and if it's really staying hard cold outside and I'm having trouble fluctuating, I just don't feed the babies. I mean, it's easy enough. I'm not a heavy feeder anyway, so it's no flack off my back. I'd rather them be safe than have food in their stomach and the temps cycle down and go and rot on them and I lose them. So.
And you said you're in Alabama now?
Yes. Yeah, I've been here for a long time now.
Gotcha. So your winters are pretty warm.
Yeah. I mean, we get cold. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we get plenty of nights in the low teens and wind chills in the single digits. But it's not, it's not like Michigan or anything. So. But yeah, in general, I mean, we herp all winter down here. It's just we shift to amphibians mostly, but I can actually have better snake days herping for salamanders in here in the winter than I can in a summer day, in this part of the country. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think people are always scared to get their snakes too cool, but you think that there's not really an issue as long as they're not fed and have to digest during a cool period.
Yeah, that's really all it is. It's just you just can't let food sit in that stomach when they're, when their temperatures are dropping, and even if it's just nighttime drops, they'll regurge, and if it's and they ultimately can die too. So you just have to pay attention to the weather. I've past quite a number of years, I've become a bit of a just obsessive about paying attention to the weather, just because of going field herping, as well as just keeping up with my room and stuff. And I'm a big gardener too, so paying attention to rain cycles and stuff like that helps me keep up with how whether I need to water or not, and that sort of thing, and all that good stuff.
So I don't know much about the process of how water snakes are bred. So obviously you're putting them together in spring or whenever they warm up.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, with water snake, because I work with mostly water snakes and rat snakes, I cohab everything. I don't individually keep anything but my king snakes. Even my milk snakes, the past 3 years that I've had them, my Pueblans were cohabbed as well. So everything based on their breeding groups are just kept together, and then I cool them down the same way, and then just warm them up. It's really no different. I just I put them in a smaller locking container, and based on how big they are, or if there's a pair or a trio sort of a thing, and pop them in the fridge, check on them periodically, open the door every couple of days, just make some fresh air is popping in there, and wake them up. And usually with those guys, it varies when they're going to breed. I've noticed that most of them pretty much breed within about a month or so of them warming up and eating and that sort of thing. I don't get to see most of the time. It's mostly I can just start telling that they're getting swollen and then palpate, and I can feel that they're there. But some of these guys will breed in the summertime and just way later. But, plenty of other snakes do that too, just depending on which part of the country they're from. You get a little farther north and those guys don't get a chance to breed as early as something from South Florida does. So it ends up being, and a lot of my water snakes are actually Florida localities. So a lot of those guys will breed summer. I've still got 3 water snake litters I'm waiting on any day now, and any day means any time in the next month, because some of them I saw breeding, and one of them I didn't. So it's a bit of a guess. I just go in there a couple times a day, throw the flashlight in. Okay, no babies.
That's what I was about
fed.
to ask. Actually, since you co-have them, do you feel like you don't see the actual lockups happening that often?
Yeah, I rarely do. And it's no big deal to me. I don't really care. I enjoy working with my stuff, and I kind of just, if stuff's going to happen, it's going to happen. If I'm doing a good job, or if the animals have been, in the case of some of the wild caught stock, if they've been in captivity long enough, they'll go when they're ready, when they've relaxed enough and put enough, fat stores on to ovulate and that sort of thing. They'll go. I've got a couple that I expected to go this spring and didn't, but they were, wild caught, although seemingly well acclimated, before, and, the year before, but, it, takes quite a bit, for them to get adjusted and change, even though they're eating good and that sort of thing. So, I had a bunch of people wanting, particularly some of my black rats and stuff, and, black rats didn't go. I was hoping my Dixie County Gulf Hammock rats would have went this year, but they didn't go. The female's feeding way more reliably this year than she was for me last year, and so I think I got a better chance. In fact, I was just throwing them in the fridge just a little while ago, the Dixie Gulf Hammocks, just before we got on here. So they're part of the early cycle, and the black rats will be going in here over the weekend, beginning of the week, whatever. I'm trying to make sure I get far enough out from last meals I fed some of them, and before I throw them in. So I got some of those guys going in early that didn't go this year for me. So.
And do you ever rotate the pairings?
Depends. Most of the time, I'm trying to think. Most of the time, I don't. I'm with a lot of these guys, I'm kind of set up where I'm going into just getting into multiple seasons with some of these guys. And I kind of am more relying on having multiple pairs of those guys, and then being able to have generations mixed from there on out, or being able to let people get mixed generation, mixed pair, unrelated pairs and stuff, rather than mixing them early on. I may, and I'll probably be doing that with my mangrove waters, because I have a bit of a fascination with phenotypic inheritance with water snakes, because one thing, most people haven't really worked with a lot of water snakes over the years, and there's a lot of variability in water snakes in general. I mean, there's some standards kind of in pattern and stuff, but especially with like the mangrove waters, you've got a lot of variability in those wild populations down there in South Florida, and particularly you have the solid red mangroves, and then you've got all these varied pattern ones, and you've got solid orangish looking ones and solid yellowish looking ones that are rare, and a lot of variability in pattern. And this year proved very well directly to me that what I thought as far as phenotypic inheritance was with those guys, I was straight up wrong. So I fortunately have a pretty decent little group at the moment, and lots of babies for the future to raise up from these different litters that I've had, that I will be doing. I will intentionally be swapping males and females up to see if the litter phenotypes, the offspring phenotypes, change based on the adult pairings. But that's kind of a long-term sort of
Plan.
Just interest for me more than anything else. I thought, and that pretty much had figured red to red on mangroves was going to produce red babies because it's not a recessive trait. Yeah, I bred red to red this year. I got a half and half litter. So I'm doing some, I've got extra males laying around, and I've got, a couple females now going. And so I'll be playing around with those in the years to come, and especially now that I'll have a lot of captive born offspring that are, in the long run, are going to be a lot harder and less worrisome about them doing well long term, because mangroves are pretty sketchy and hard to get established. Some go a little bit better than others, but failure rate's still pretty high on them. And so the captive born babies are the key for down the road. So I'll definitely be doing more, obvious aside from genetic diversity with breeding, but I'll be doing lots of monitoring of how I'm pairing and who I'm pairing, and then mixing up to see if it's different, that sort of thing, as the next number of seasons go on, so to speak.
So I wasn't really aware of this, but you're seeing as far as the offspring. I mean, it could be like an Amazon tree boa type of situation where you put two together and it kind of throws a few different kinds of phenotypes. Or
Right, exactly. With even with just the different bandits, I tend to see some variation, and not as drastic as with the mangroves, obviously, but I do see, certain colors reproduce stronger than others, as far as um, how the babies are looking in certain litters. Like I have certain ones where this one red female banded, I've bred her to two different males, but boy, those babies really strongly threw off of her. I didn't get as much influence off of the males, either one of the males between the two litters. And it was a year between the two litters. So, but the babies really were strongly influenced off of mom and the way she looks, more so than the dads in either situation. Because the first one is a melanistic, which granted he would have started out as more of a typical banded looking animal and progressed to be melanistic over a period of time, whether it be 6 months to a year or even longer, depending on that animal. And I don't know, because he was mature when I got him. But I got almost identical babies breeding, a brown and black banded animal this year to the same female, and I didn't get it wasn't much difference really, between the two. She threw very strongly. And I've got some babies from the first litter that I've raised up that'll be going maybe one more year out, but it's pretty interesting. It's one of those things where people haven't worked enough with Nerodia, and particularly with the bandits, where there's a lot of natural phenotypic variation. And so I'm enjoying working with them just because of, it's a bit of an unexpected sort of thing every time I have a litter and see what's produced, and if I have an opportunity to, mix up gene pools, as far as different males and different females from the same locality, then it helps out. I mean, most of the time I do have opportunities to get more animals when I'm at a given spot, but I don't like to click more than what I'm going to work with myself, and don't like to get more. I tend to just, with the waters, most of the time I just get a pair from a particular spot, and if I decide down the road I want more, I can go back to that spot and cross my fingers and hope I can, get some more, when I want to add more blood in. Whereas the rat snakes, most of the time I'm trying to get my hands on two pairs from the locality more times than not. I don't know why I do that with waters. I think it's probably just because of the interest in waters and the interest in rats. I don't want to have so many water snake babies around, and it's still taking a little bit. It's amazing how many people want to buy baby water snakes, though. It's really interesting. Yeah, yeah, I sell them better than I do rat snakes.
That's great. Well, you may be one of the only guys producing them, so I guess that helps.
Yeah, there's some out. There's a few folks out there. There's a great girl down in South Alabama that does a great job. Jennifer French does a great job breeding water snakes. My in-state Nerodiophile. She's a big Nerodia fan, and you'll see her a lot on the different Nerodia Facebook pages and other wild snake pages out there, just educating the world about them. She does a great job. And it's that supply and demand thing. I'm not going to go just because I want to go and produce 50 litters of baby water snakes just because I have an interest in it, want to see what the babies, come out as. There's a realism of what time I have and to put into them, space for the adults, and getting rid of the offspring. I don't want to, overdo it, so just let it build up over time. And, so far it's been going pretty good. I tend to, I'm almost sold out of everything that I've got, but I don't push it real hard either. I tend to hold back again. Like I said, I hold back too much. So,
well, I was going to ask, especially with those things like the mangroves where you're seeing reds and bends and different types of things going on. Is it easy to pick your holdbacks, or do they develop into really different
No,
animals?
that's why I hold back too many. and I learned badly last year that I had too many people want them, and I didn't hold back enough. Because I seem to have a problem with the locality where mine got all sourced out from, with having darker or gray colored females. All my females are red. And so I'm trying to make a point to hold back babies that are the darker pattern. More just one, because I like those other ones. Yeah, red's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great. People love them. Solid red snake's the bomb. But there's not much to it. It's a red snake. Yeah, there's slight variation.
What do you mean there's not much to it? It's a red snake is enough.
I know. I agree. Don't get me wrong. I love my two big red girls, and I love the red ones that I held back from last year. But I literally last year, the only thing I have is an unrelated pair of reds. I got a close buddy, my rat snake breeding partner. He's got a pair that I think one is a darker patterned animal and one's a red. So I'll end up getting those offspring back from him when he breeds them. He just wanted them to actually, I think he's going to cohab them with his Darkhorse rats or something like that, or his Everglades rats. I don't know which. He's going to do a mixed enclosure. He has a little bit more display type cages with some of his rat snakes, and so he tends to he's starting to mix a few things together, and so he wanted some mangroves to mix in with one of the two. Again, I don't remember if it was his Darkhorse or his Everglades, but that's interesting. Yeah, this year I'm going a little overboard and trying to keep too many back, I think.
Yeah, no. I mean, first of all, you should probably put up pictures on a Facebook group somewhere of you cohabbing animals and see what people say.
It's out there, and I don't shy from it. I say it every time. For me, it's way easier. It allows me to keep more animals. I say that because I can just keep pairs together, and I don't have to take the time to put them together to breed them and do all that sort of stuff. If I'm doing a good job, they're going to breed. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. And, the only hang up is you do have some headaches when it comes to feeding time with certain overly feisty individuals that are just eager to eat, particularly certain females, and so you got to pay attention to them when you're feeding and stuff like that. And sometimes the over eager ones, they get their food and then they get thrown in a bag so that the females can eat, particularly I have a lot of locality that with the rats that the females are quite shy compared to the males. Males will go and hammer down as much as I'll give them eagerly, come right for them. The females are like, give me 10 or 15 minutes. Let me leave this in front of me and we'll make it happen. But if I do that when they're together, the males just scoff them down. So I'll usually give males something and throw it in there. Or in a lot of cases with my guys, because I'm, dare I use the word minimalist feeder, but I'm not a stuffer. I don't keep them, everybody on heat strips with a high-end range available to them. So I like my animals thin. I don't like my animals fat. I like them to look like I would go catch them just in a good, healthy, format. So most of the time my males get fed every 3 or 4 times I feed the females more time, most of the time, just because they don't need it. They're not doing anything. The girls are doing a lot more physically. And so they need the nourishment and the boys don't. So a lot of times I'll just yank a male out, throw them in a bag, for 15 or 20 minutes and give the females opportunities, to eat a few meals that way, So, but yeah, there's plenty of people out there that think cohabiting is the devil's work, just I don't understand why. I really don't. It's like, we cohab lizards to breed them and we cohab turtles to breed them, why not cohab snakes? It's,
It's
kind of a point because snakes are less intelligent. Therefore, you would think they would care less that someone else was around them. But
it's scary. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think our black rats.
Listen,
those
I wouldn't
devils.
do it unless I have enough resources to give them something big.
Our black rats are such devils. I'd be very scared to put them. I mean, but that's towards us. I have no idea how they'd be toward each other.
No, they'd be fine.
But
they just hate you.
They just hate, yeah. Are ours boys? I don't even know.
No, boy and a girl.
Oh, I didn't realize you got a pair.
Yeah, I wouldn't, for me, I wouldn't do it any other way. It's just, to me, it makes way more sense. It allows them to interact at their own leisure. It's not a forced interaction as far as trying to get them to breed and stuff like that. They're going to do it when they're going to do it. And I don't, and if they don't, well, they don't. I don't, it doesn't bother me. sure, I want to. This year, I had a lot of people begging me for baby black rats, because my adults are particularly nice. They're particularly dark. I was fortunate enough through two buddies up in the Carolina areas to get some really nice locality animals. And, so everybody was wanting some, and, didn't happen. So that's the way it goes. It'll happen. It'll happen when it's meant to happen, and it'll start going steady after that. So, but that's the deal with, when you're working with, fresh stock and getting new lines, new localities and lines established with fresh blood is, it takes time. It's not going to just happen, as soon as you raise up an animal big enough and that corn snake breeds at 18 inches, it doesn't work like that when you're, working with fresh animals. It's a little more time consuming, and that's fine for me.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything to the more I pay attention to it, as far as black rats go, like growing up finding black rats, when people post pictures of them finding black rats in the wild, I feel like they're always nicer specimens than what we have in captivity. Like, I don't see many pitch black animals in comparison to the ones that I've seen in the wild for some reason. You would think you would pick those animals immediately and it'd be passed down.
It's one reason why, like, for me, I didn't get black rats for a long time because I was just too picky about what I wanted. I want really, really dark animals because ultimately that's what other people are going to want. So if I'm going to work with them and ultimately have offspring, I'm going to have some, especially because I'm not working with the newest morph or whatever, that is the hottest thing on the market. I'm working with black rat snake, working with a yellow rat snake. I'm working with, these things that everybody has in their backyards in different parts of the country. I want them to be kind of the quintessential examples of them. And so it's not as much as that I'm necessarily selecting for them, but I'm just choosing localities where those particular animals are the most token examples of representatives of their, and I can't even say species now because with taxonomy changes, it's all
the same shit, man.
It's shit in the paddle fan. It's all it is, man. But yeah, it's just some of my philosophy is it comes down from my good friend Bill, who he and I work on majority of the rat snake projects together. He's my folks' age, and his kind of rat snake collection is based off of the 1958, I think it is, Peterson's Field Guide of what represented the rat snakes at that time. And so his collection kind of represents that, with obviously more current additions as things like Slowinski rats have come into to recognition, whereas it may have been something he would have worked with anyways, knowing that was an integrate zone sort of thing, but knowing that it's our newest rat snake species, sort of, considering all the rearranging. There's others obviously now, but we tend to work with token examples in different parts of the range. Things like Great Plains rat snakes have a huge range up the whole middle of the country there, but we're working with the intermontanes, out of Colorado, and we're working with alpines from over there in West Texas, and I'd kind of like to get some South Texas scrub thorns one day, but it's, I even know somebody down there, but it's a long ways away to get down there, so it's not something that's happened so far. One of these days it will, but just I try to look to get specimens from solid token localities, that were, they're good examples of certain areas. It's like yellow rats. I've got all these localities of yellow rats all up through Florida now, and and they all vary, whether it's from the Keys all the way up to my youthful county of Seminole County along St. John's. They all vary, and and everybody has their own likes and dislikes, but depending on what part of the state, Florida, or where they saw yellow rat snakes for the first time. But I spent a bunch of years in the past couple of years trying to turn up areas to find some yellow rats from back home, and finally found a place this year, and I've added a nice little group of token examples of yellow rats, of what I consider yellow rats, and actually my buddy considers to be yellow rats, textbook yellow rats. And so now, fortunately, one of the females was gravid that I caught, and so I've got some babies that just hatched out from those that we're splitting and raising up because the male would have been unrelated to any of my other too. And I think I ultimately caught, I think, 5 or 6 animals and just kept a trio for now. And with these babies as some unrelated blood for the other pair to go with for down the road. So we've got some good blood for, you know, a good few generations without needing to go and grab any others, you know, from the same spot. We don't have to bother the wild gene pool. We've got enough diversification for you know.
You're a
2 or 3
very
generations at
successful
least.
herper. I feel like
Yeah.
I should have counted like how many things. Like you find so much.
He's also in
Well,
Florida, which is a pretty good
Yeah,
place.
well,
And he knows what he's doing. No, for
but
that
yeah, I
particular
mean,
animal, but
yeah, but you'd be surprised though, because the urban sprawl is so much in Florida. It's actually really hard to herp down there in certain areas, at least where I grew up in the north side of Orlando areas. It's just people everywhere. So you have to find these little wooded areas that are left and go hit them at the right times of the year. And it's no different than anything else. I think, you know, you just have to learn your animals, learn their niche habitats, and put the time in. Really, is what it comes down to more than anything. You know, it's just, you know, as with any others. I mean, most of my time in the field actually is spent salamander hunting. I only go snake hunting when I want something in particular to work with, and then I'll go target that area. I mean, we look for everything while we're there, but you know, I'll go target something in particular that I want to find. And
now bring us
most of the
through
time,
a little bit.
I spend it in the hills. I spend it in the hills flipping logs, taking pictures of salamanders.
Bring us through a little bit, since you're hitting on it, like the process of bringing in new stock and kind of, are there permits in place? What do you have to do? Bring it across.
It depends on where you're at. Every state is different, you know. And here in Alabama, you know, most of our public lands are all off limits, you know, whether it be a national forest or otherwise. In other states, that's not the case. Certain states, you know, you have to have a fishing license. Other states, you have to have hunting licenses and reptile stamps, and you know, it varies, you know, all over the country depending on what, you know, the different laws are. My buddy maintains fishing licenses and hunting licenses in multiple states around this country and keeps them up regardless of whether he goes, because he expects to maybe go back at some point, so that he always has that legal voucher of having, you know, gotten a particular species, you know, from somewhere, whether it's Arizona's needing a hunting license or Texas or whatever. You know, you got to have certain permits and stuff in certain areas. In other states, like in Florida, they don't have much regulation at all in that, as long as it's not one of the, you know, protected species. You know, and here in Alabama, that we have certain species that are protected, you know, that you just can't have, period. And then you have certain areas, you know, certain public lands and the forests and stuff that are all off limits too. So, you know, like in state, I think the only thing I work with is a couple banded waters I can catch. I've caught from some creeks down by my friend's house in south part of the state, and some rat snakes I caught in my own backyard. You know, I don't work with much else here, but most of it's just because my interest in Florida and the diversity of species and phenotypes in Florida is so high that, you know, my interest tends to go down there, because from the bottom to the top of the state, you have a lot of variation in water snakes, rat snakes, king snakes, and all the above. You know, everything but, I guess, maybe ribbon snakes don't vary too much, but you know, a lot of species do vary quite drastically across snakes, rat snakes being the prime one, and king snakes. So that tends to be a great place to go down and go home and visit, meet up with friends, whatever the case may be, and go have a good time out in the field and add some fresh blood if I'm fortunate enough to.
Absolutely.
Okay, this might be a newbie question, but our friend Dallas got some black rat stinks recently, and when he posted about them on Facebook, he's put calico morph black rat stinks, but he put morph in quotations. And I've been meaning to ask you that. Why would you put morph in quotations with calico black rat stinks?
That's kind of
I
weird.
didn't know if that was like a thing people do.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it like wasn't actually considered a morph or something.
Well, I thought maybe it would be like one of those bubblegum rat things, you know, the yellow rat, the black. It's all Eastern, so it's all the same, so who cares?
Yeah, well, actually, but like the calicos technically aren't a black rat.
Maybe that's why he did that.
They came out of Jefferson. I think it's Jefferson County in Kentucky, and the local stock in that area are not black at all. So it's, you know, it goes back to the new revisions of taxonomy and stuff, where Easterns are in the East Coast, Midlands in the middle, and Westerns are now obsolete on the West. That, you know, what was one thing is not necessarily what it is now, and regardless of what you're accepting or not accepting on it, irrelevantly, a black rat from Pennsylvania and a calico rat from Kentucky, they're not the same thing, period. They don't look the same as a wild animal, as a normal wild animal. The animals would never have bred naturally across those different areas. So, you know, that's one thing with a lot of the morphs and stuff, is particularly, and you see that with the black rat morphs, is black rats used to be considered everywhere from Nebraska and Missouri and everywhere over that way, and came all the way across the northern portion, you know, across the upper Midwest and the East Coast. And now there's 3 separate species within that color designation, even if a lot of them, particularly up the middle here in the Midland range, you get up in the Kentucky and stuff, and most of those animals, unless you're up near the Appalachians, they're not really black at all. They're just a darker gray rat snake on the whole. But, you know, I'm sure it'll all change in 10 years anyway. So
that's really confusing.
Is part of the
find a way
reason
to
why you do locality is because, I mean,
some of that it has really reinforced it for me. I mean, some of it is just the natural variation from the different regions and spots where these different animals come. Because, you know, a yellow rat snake in the county I grew up in Seminole County in Florida is quite a different animal than if you go over to, let's say, Hernando County over on the West Coast. Those are very different looking yellow rats. Or you go down near Okeechobee and get into the range of what, you know, was an Everglades rat. You know, those animals vary a lot even in that immediate area. So these animals all vary across the range. But yeah, the locality stuff has kind of been reinforced a little bit with taxonomy changes, because if I'm working with animals from a particular county or particular spot or a particular river or whatever, it's not going to change. They can change the taxonomy all they want, you know, but it's not going to, it may change what the taxonomy name is for that particular animal, but it's not changing that animal. I don't suddenly have a mutt, you know, and like the white oak gray rat snakes, the coastal gray rat snakes from the northern Gulf Coast is a perfectly good example. You have some animals that look really similar all the way, you know, whether you're from Baldwin County on the east side of the Mobile Bay all the way over to like Lake Butler, Florida. You've got a huge range of animals that have a pretty similar look to them. Granted, there's a little difference to the east than there is to the west on the grand scheme of things, but that's now divided as 2 separate species down the middle at the Apalachicola River. And so I work with 2 different white oak rat snakes now, because there's technically 2 species. So I have some from one side and I have some from the other side, you know, and looking at them, I mean, you do see differences. But they all vary a lot too, because you can find ones that are much darker in an area where usually they're way light, and you find other ones way light in an area that are mediocrely dark in the wild. So, you know, it's, you know, but either way, you know, I've got my Santa Rosa. A lot of people have some of my baby Santa Rosa white oaks, and, you know, I was fortunate enough to get 2 pairs of animals from a buddy's property of animals that come into his rat room, you know, and he picked a few up here and there, and I ended up getting 2 unrelated wild caught pairs, you know, from him at different ages at the time, but you know, off the same piece of property. So, you know, it's that sort of thing that, you know, they can change it again and change it back or do whatever they want, but it's, you know, I know exactly where they came from. So, you know, it's not an animal from Liberty County or Taylor County or somewhere farther east. You know, it's same little spot, you know, in Santa Rosa County. So that's kind of the nomenclature changes have kind of reinforced why I do. And the fox snakes are the same sort of thing. That's angered a lot of people, the way those kind of got divided up and clumped together. And so sticking with, you know, locality animals will help maintain those changes and revisions over the years, and won't be affected by it, I guess maybe would be the right way to call it.
Yeah, because you end up just by default, things that you thought were pure end up being not pure now, and then you're like, and now you can't make it pure again.
Right, so, you can't. And for a lot of people, they don't care. They just want their pet snakes. They want to enjoy them. They don't care where they came from. They don't care any of that, and that's fine and dandy. I got nothing against that at all. But, you know, I tend to, you know, I've really grown appreciative of doing, you know, spending time in the field as much as I can, and, you know, seeing these guys in their natural form. And because of the morph market that's out there, and everybody's, you know, draw to aberrant looking animals and making hybrids and whatever else. And really, and back in the old days of early on in the situation, they, people just bred whatever they could that looked similar, so to speak. And a lot of genetics are really iffy nowadays from some of those old bloodlines of various stuff. And so, there was few people that really paid attention to making sure their animals came from similar areas, and so there's a lot of technically mutts based on current taxonomy out there, whether it be morphs or not even morphs in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably be hard pressed to find any type of mutation of corn snake that's pure, whether or not people want to say that they're pure or not. Down the line,
there's only one that I could say at this moment that would be pure, and that would be Howie Sherman's Red Zeps, because he had a single albino animal pop up, never out of a pair, never happened in any of the other litters, and his animals were all collected on his stock was all collected on the OKT Hunt Club grounds by himself. So this single albino animal popped up naturally, never happened again in successive litters or previous litters. So his Red Zepp line, at least if you get it through him or one of his immediate, crowd of dedicated folks, you're gonna get a true locality red rat snake in a morph form. Or if you get some Devil's Garden anatheristics from down in South Florida, they still exist in a fairly reasonable number in the population down there. And in fact, I knew somebody just a year or so ago got a gravid female, and percentage of the offspring were all anery. So, wow. But it's hard in the grand scheme of things. You're still dealing with locality guys on the whole. I mean, my buddy and I will be in the coming years introducing an albino. There will be a morph and a technicality, but it'll be a locality morph like the way the moonshines are. Horry County greenish rats. We'll be introducing an albino, hopefully, if we're successful and everything breeds and does what it's supposed to. But we'll be introducing a new albino in a few years. And he kind of wasn't going to do it, didn't want to do it because it's an albino, and I was kind of hesitant at the same time. But it's like our favorite locality of rat snake, and we can offer a lot of genetic diversity as years come with it down the road, and not just line breed the hell out of it. And just to produce a bunch of albinos, we can continue to infuse fresh blood into the line and not overproduce them, and try to do it. So hopefully in the years to come, we'll have some amelanistic Gulf hammock rat snakes in the market. But it's project very early in the works.
Now, was that a wild caught animal?
Yeah.
Or did it pop out of a clutch?
No, it's wild caught yearling male. My buddy cruised it this past December on a warm day. He passes through there in the winter times.
December, somewhere when no one else would even be looking.
Right, and that's usually when he passes through, and he can usually pick up a random male to add into the gene pool every year or two on those warm days. And he didn't even he refused to even tell me what he found until I came up the next visit. So I was like in the hanging situation for like 3 or 4 months when he first told me about it. He didn't tell me about it for like 2 months, and then he told me about it, and then I had like 3 months before I got up to visit him, and he wouldn't tell me what it was until I saw it. I mean, he just told me he found something really cool down in Levy County, and I thought maybe he just cruised a king or something, because you don't come across kings in Levy County very often without being in just the right spot at the right time of the year and that sort of thing. But no, that wasn't it. And, a couple months later, I was out cruising on the same road just on purpose, knowing that I certainly wasn't going to even see another rat snake on that stretch of road. But it's in the same area where he's always cruised before, and for pushing 40 years. And it's first time he's ever come across, an albino or anything like that. And he always said he was never even going to tell anybody. But, he showed me and told me. It took me, 6 more months before I could get him to take a picture of it. And so now we got a picture of it. And it's doing well. We think it'll be big enough to breed a female this coming spring. So we'll see what happens. And then we got to raise up babies and prove it out 3 years from then. So, well, long time in the works, but a new locality, more like the moonshine. So I need to come up with a cool name for them, like moonshine. I don't know if I'm going to make that work, but it probably it'd be good. The guys up in Kentucky came up with their calicos and lemons and stuff, and guys in Carolinas came up with their moonshines. I guess I need to come up with something for this locality that's not even a legit subspecies anymore. So we'll figure something up, and by the time I can even have any sort of hets available or anything.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a super cool project, and it's something that's obviously extremely unique to you, and I mean, a once in a lifetime animal. Clearly,
yeah, it is. It is, and the cool thing about that area is because it's a mixing zone with grays and yellows, you have a lot of variation from animal to animal there, depending on, and it doesn't necessarily as much have to do with the part of the county that you find them in. It has to do with the niche habitat that you find them in. Whether you're down in the low wet riverine forests, or you're up in the longleaf forests, or even up in the sandhill areas. There's a lot of areas within Levy County and the neighboring counties of Dixie and Citrus that force a lot of variation, survival variation phenotypically in the rat snakes. And so, you tend to see a lot of variation in the Gulf hammock rat snake, even just from within Levy County. And we have examples that I've got a really nice hypotype, although it's not necessarily recessive hypotype, but a naturally hypo looking animal that he had caught, quite a few years ago now, probably pushing 10 years ago as a baby, and raised it up, and he bred it once, and now I have it. That it's an almost white animal with red blotches and a little H connecting pattern, not as much as, but it wasn't found down in the riverine forests, where we normally would look for our stock to get those token great motley earth tone Gulf hammock rat snakes. It was from a little drier area, and so as a result, it doesn't quite have the same motley pattern. But it's still a really cool animal, and I'm going to do a breeding with him. He was bred once in 15. I have him now, and I'm going to breed him back to one of his daughters. I'm breeding his other daughter to his other daughter to a wild caught male to continue to bring in some fresh blood in, but I want to see how the color comes along. He bred it initially, this really light animal, to a really dark classic animal, to try to see if he could get the contrasting colors, if he could get the heavy pattern with the light background. Didn't really work out like that. They're just kind of typically a little bit dirty looking females, but still look nice. They're just not like deep classic animals like some of the other stock he's produced over the years and that I've got raising up now. But it's all just fun and games. Trying not to naturally selectively breed, but at the same time, that's all we do anyways. It's just but trying to constantly infuse blood when we can and introduce fresh blood. I think that was the main reason he was willing to breed this albino animal, was because it was a male, so it would be good it'd be fresh genetics in the gene pool. That's the way we tend to do it, is using males and bringing fresh males into a breeding population, because you get that extra chromosome in there, and so you get fresh blood that way, and you just keep your female lines like they are.
It's hard not to just selectively breed, because it's like we have this vision in our head of like what it could be, and
Sure.
like,
I mean, that's all part of it. I mean, as much as I say I breed locality and I try to breed as natural as I can, I'm still holding back animals for this reason or that reason, because it's pretty. And at the same time, I tend to, like with my water snakes, I'll right off, I hold back the ugliest ones, because I don't necessarily know what they're going to mature like, and so I want to see how they're going to mature, how different they're going to mature than these gaudy, bright red or bright orange looking animals. I want to see what that dark, ugly looking thing is going to look like in a year or 2 years down the road. And honestly, I'm getting to the point now where I'm actually liking what those babies look like more so than the others, because I got less of them. There's
okay.
So it's the variability. I mean, it's what's in the wild anyways. You go and the one night we were down in South Florida and we're cruising this past February. I mean, gosh, I must have flipped, I don't know, 20 plus water snakes off the road. And sorry, I had to plug my phone in there.
It's okay.
This thing definitely eating batteries. I'm already down to 15%. So,
Whoa.
Yeah, ate it hard. But I saw at least 20 animals, if not more than that, in a short window of time crossing the road. Every time we'd stop for one, we'd literally find 3 or 4 of them right in that immediate area on the edge of the road and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I absolutely selected for what I wanted, but I was seeing animals in that area that were a higher prevalence to yellow, and yellow is not something I usually see often in a lot of Florida water snake populations, or even southern banded populations. It's not one I see. So the pair that I kept were both of high yellow prevalence to their pattern. And granted, I saw solid black ones and I saw dark banded ones. I saw all sorts of colors, but I was like, yeah, those yellows. And I try to think a little bit too of the marketability of it, whether it's marketability or just being able to find interest in offspring when it comes down to it, because I can't keep everything. So I've got to make sure that I've got something that other people are going to want to have. You know what I mean? So if I can have some babies that are going to be on the yellower side, well, it's going to draw some interest to them. I can hopefully find people interested in having some of those offspring when I do have them.
At the end of the day, you need snakes that people are going to like, even no matter how stringent, you try to be with it, and how particular try to be. I mean, it matters at the end of the day.
It does matter, because I mean, you could, otherwise you just got to stop. And I mean, having worked in the zoo field, I had to deal with that kind of thing all the time, because there was so many regulations from that particular facility or the governing bodies within the zoo profession that, you breed stuff, but you can only surplus to certain entities and institutions and that sort of thing. And so you end up having to stop breeding certain things and only selectively breed certain things because of opportunities to surplus off animals, just because of everybody's rules and regulations in doing so. And so it forces you to kind of take stock and realize that, like, yeah, I may want to work with them, like doing basilisks. I may want to go have a bunch of breeding groups of basilisks, but I don't know necessarily that I'm going to find homes for 50 or 60 baby basilisks over the course of a year. I might be able to. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I could always find a dealer to wholesale stuff off to, but I tend to prefer to have stuff go to people directly if I can, make that happen. I haven't gone that route in a long time. I prefer to do things the way I do it right now, with dealing with people with, mutual interests in certain types of animals, making sure that they're going to go to these people, some people do flip them. I see some of my babies go to other people and usually keep track of where they go, but, I prefer to let them go to, have stuff go directly to the people that are going to work with them. And so far, that's been an option so far for me. So when that doesn't become an option, well, we'll reevaluate things at that time.
Right. Yeah. It's sometimes you can get yourself in the situation to where, either money needs to come in or animals need to go out. There's space constraints, whatever's going on at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's rodents are expensive, man. And caging is expensive. I mean, I take a lot of good philosophies from some folks that I've got to know in years past of taking a very economical approach to husbandry. A lot of folks out there are very much the opposite of that and feel that, we need to spend as much money and do all that we can for these guys that we're keeping and taking care of. But when it comes down to it, economics is what it is. Great guy main guy I'm referring to, who's no longer with us anymore, is Bert Langerwerf, Agama International. He was from the Netherlands, and he had moved here to the States and actually had settled here in Alabama and developed the largest lizard breeding farm in the world. I actually was in correspondence with him when I was still in high school in Florida, but getting to visit him multiple times over the years while he was still alive and see how he did things and how he did things from a making a living doing it perspective really allowed me to change perspectives as to how and why I do things and my approach to doing things. And it allowed me to do things in a very economical manner while I was in the zoo field, and puts me in a position to make economically thrifty decisions on husbandry for myself as well. As I try to do as much as I can in manners that don't cost much, don't cost any, and that sort of approach, because in the long run, it allows me to do it better, do it less stressfully, and enjoy it more. If, I can go buy a $20, corn snake or something and keep it as a pet and spend $500 on an enclosure and all this stuff, and it's great. There's nothing wrong with it, but at the same time, I could take that $500 and do a whole lot more with it, whether it be set up a rodent breeding, rack system, or who knows what. I mean, there's a million things you could do. Pay electric bill for the house in general. All those things. All these things come into realistic perspective when you keep more than one or two pet animals, and those one or two pet animals are around because guys like me and these other guys out there breed a bunch of stuff. We do it because we enjoy it. Well, most of us do. Others do it much more from a business perspective, and I've kept things in the past for those reasons, and I don't anymore because I didn't enjoy doing it for those reasons. I did bearded dragons for a number of years just because I considered them marketable and I could work with something I enjoyed could enjoy working with because I love lizards. But I hated being in that competitive market if everybody's got bearded dragons and you don't have the newest morph, and and it just gets to be a vicious cycle that I didn't like being in. So I decided once I got in with the social media thing and a few friends that I could find ways to get in touch with people and find people that liked the same things I did, and I didn't have to rely on going to shows nearby to find the three people that may talk to me with what stupid water snakes I have. Because ultimately, if I go to a reptile show here in my state, that's pretty much all I'm going to get out of the situation. If I have some my adult maybe red mangroves, I may get some interest in a few of the babies, but at the same time, some of those people are going to be like, I'm not spending that on a water snake.
How much are they?
My mangroves, this year I'm doing 100 a piece, and it goes down depending on how many you buy. I was female heavy, so I get pretty good deals if you're doing trios. But last year I was doing, I think, 1 1/4 for female reds. But they're hard to establish. They don't establish well. A number of them that I had gotten through a friend from his field research work, that students were doing some captive studying on to figure out how things didn't want to return back to the wild. I mean, I had at least a 30-40% mortality rate in getting those guys established.
Whoa.
They'd already had them for almost 2 months.
Wow.
It's just, some snakes don't adapt as well to captivity. And I see that with other species of water snakes, and why I don't work with some species of water snakes, because they just don't do as well, at least under the conditions that I'm able to offer. I've thrown my hands up on northern water snakes, but I can do really well with midlands, and that's just a different subspecies from a different part of the country.
Now,
whatever the reasons are, I don't know, but I tried on a couple of species and I throw my hands up and go, just not meant for me. I can't offer them what makes them happy within my husbandry availability here in Alabama.
Now, are you at the point where you have F2s and F3s? And have you seen better
with
rates
a lot of my
well?
rat snakes? Yes, only because of friends, getting stocks from them. With the water snakes, no. I have got some F1s now that if I was forcing them, they would be going this next spring. If I was really stuffing them, I could have them to that point, but they're not at that point because I'm not willing to push them. Maybe some of the males, and I'm actually considering, in the case of one pair, maybe letting this one male try to breed a female, an older female, maybe, mostly just because I want to go back to, I haven't been able to procure a male. Fortunately, I tend to choose with my water snakes going hunting for them at certain times of the year, so that I stand good chances of the females already being gravid and getting some free genetics out of the situation. And so I've got a number of animals that were wild bred F1s that I've been raising up now, and others that were captives at the same, from the same years 2 and 3 years ago. They're getting into that neighborhood now. But because I slow grow stuff and just don't want fat animals and try to raise them up a little more naturally, weight-wise and stuff, I'm getting into that neighborhood now. Over the next 1 to 3 years, I will really be hitting those multiple generations. Some people want to see it because mostly I just feed because I do so much rodents. They want to see those multiple generations with the water snakes. But I can tell you, most of my water snakes, once they're on rodents, they won't even take fish from me. They just want those rodents. I think they realize that. I think the animals almost know metabolically, that those rodents have more to them. And I don't have to feed them as often because they have, they're much more packed with nutrition and fat and stuff, and I just don't have to try to constantly feed these water snakes like they would normally eat almost on a daily basis, in the wild, so to speak. So,
now, do you think that with the mangroves in particular, do you feel that you will get more viability as far as, a better survival rate as
Over
the
time.
generations go?
the captive born babies, period, and the ones I got last year, the babies that I had born last year were wild bred. I acquired the animals
While they're gravid.
from a guy, my original 2 pairs from a guy in Florida as fresh collected animals. And I had not done that in 20 years. But it was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get my hands and get a chance to do this. So I bit the bullet. I spent the money, bordering on completely regretting it the entire time, just because I don't like going that route to acquire my animals. But it was a calculated move that worked out well. Both females were very early gravid at that time, and I got a nice small clutch, which is really all mangroves ever have, is small clutches. Out of each of them, gave me some nice, super hardy babies. That's the great thing about mangroves, is the babies are super. They're rock solid, just like a banded water snake is. As far as once they're feeding, they're much better than dealing with the adults. Most of my adults now, I've had them now long enough that they're pretty good. I still have 2 females that I still feel a little sketchy about, as far as long-term survivability. But, each month passes, I feel a little bit better about them, being around for many years to continue to produce some F1 babies for me. But, I've had banded waters that didn't acclimate well and didn't do well. More times than not, it's more mature animals. And so I've tried to, as much as I can, avoid getting more mature animals when the opportunity exists, because they don't acclimate as well. Younger animals acclimate well, and I do the same thing with rat snakes when I have the preference. I try to get younger animals if I'm in that position too, because they're just more adaptable, a little easier to get established and thrive and become breeding animals down the road. So that tends to be my preference when I can.
I feel like in 3 years, like if we talked, obviously not saying we're going to wait 3 years to talk to him again, but if in 3 years we talk to him again, it's going to be a completely different conversation. Like I feel like if someone talks to us in 3 years, we're like doing the same thing, but he has so many like things lined up.
Yeah,
like
things are just,
years.
It seems like your gears.
You're on the ground floor of so many different products. Like it's
have
crazy.
A lot of stuff that I've just been raising up that are from my buddies' efforts and stuff. Some of the offspring I surplus, particularly some of the baby rat snakes and stuff I have now, are stuff that he's produced. Either I hatched off the babies, or as soon as they hatch off, I have them. He's older. He's retired. He doesn't like messing with starting a whole bunch of babies. He doesn't like having to peddle off the offspring. And it doesn't even interest him. He wants the couple of babies he wants to hang on to for down the road. And sometimes it's not even that. He just asks me to hold back a couple of babies, and I give them back to him in 6 months or a year once they're going well. He just doesn't like dealing with it. So a lot of the babies, when I get clutches from him, I'm actually holding back a portion of those clutches so that I have backups for his stuff, and I can get to work with some of those localities myself. But I've got a lot of stuff right now for the past 3 or 4 years that I'm still raising up and working with that were from his collecting efforts over the years that we still don't have reproducing at the moment, or because like he's lost single animals or something. Like the Intermontanes right now, we have no mature females right now. Deckert's, the F2 female, died 2 years ago, so we haven't been producing any, and hopefully this next year will finally be a year we're producing locality Deckert's again. Bairds, I've been holding back Bairds to raise up some of my own, and been waiting for females most particularly, and had to wait for him to have a female raise up from some of the male siblings that I've got of his. So it's, a lot of it's a process of, being patient. Emery's rats, I've got some nice alpine Emery's rats too that are, I've been raising up and waiting to actually have my own stock of, and they have little small 3 or 4 clutch litters. So any of the babies that he ends up producing from his pair, I just end up keeping them all. I don't get rid of them. So, one of these days, some of these cool localities will become more available to people that actually care about that kind of thing.
Right.
So how many snakes do you have in your collection currently?
Like I count them. Counting,
Ballpark.
not counting snakes is straight up deniability. Okay, I don't want to know. I don't care to know. My buddy Bill and I
Ballpark
kind of
it.
have a little. I don't know.
What?
200 maybe. I don't know. I mean, it
Okay,
depends
yeah.
on the time of the year. I got babies coming out. I got babies all over the place in there right now. So, I mean, I met up with him halfway between here and where he lives a month, 5 weeks ago, and I mean, I had 5 clutches of babies, on a dime instantly, so
Whoa.
none of them were started. Well, one clutch was started. The fox snakes were started,
That's,
but yellow rats,
that's brutal.
Everglades, all these, none of them are started. Some of them are, freshly hatched. Some of them are just done for a shed. So it's like, on top of the 5 and 6, 7 water snake litters and the multiple rat snake litters, and I'm hatching out, I got bins full of baby snakes that I got to get started out of his stuff, and so it's a lot of work. And I've got a lot of stuff that I don't even breed. I've got a lot of single animals that aren't paired up that I just don't want to get rid of, or I haven't scrounged up a mate for from the same area, unsuccessful field trips and that sort of thing. I mean, I've got a fox snake that from one that that Bill had given me that's, gosh, I don't know, it's 13 or 14 years old, but we don't know the locality on it. We have a guess of what it is based on what it looks like and where animals would have been coming from at that time, but it's, it's like an F1 animal that's probably from Indiana, but we don't know for sure, so it's a pet. I just have it.
Yeah, that's a
And
dangerous
I've got,
assumption to make when you're playing the
right,
game that you play.
right. 20 years ago, sure, it would have bred to whatever I had, or, and anybody else would have, and plenty of people would now, but, he's just living his life out, I don't even cool him anymore. I just, he just stays in there. He's got his spot. He gets his mice, couple mice every few weeks, and I don't keep him big and fat. He doesn't need to. He doesn't do anything, And I've got a handful of other animals just like that. I've been raising up male Baird's rats for a couple of years now, and haven't had a female. Now I've got a couple babies, but those two fellows have been sitting around for years. I got various red rat localities, that I don't have mates for still, but just a bunch of freeloaders doing their thing, and a breeder's perspective, taking up space and and rodent funds. But I work with them because I enjoy them. So
That's where I always get the one male always fucks me over. It's different if you have a female lying around, but it's the one male. Then you're like, I don't want to spend the 4 years or 3 years on a female, depending and you just never get a female ever.
I've got so many males laying around that that I don't have mates for, and that I don't want to get rid of because I might get a mate for it. I might find one, or I can find somebody. Like I was fortunate enough when we went down to South Florida, is I caught a young of the year little South Dade red rat snake. Classic one, hunting geckos on a bridge on an overpass, and I'm like, there's plenty of them out there, but I really want them. And I found a guy that caught 2 gravid females from 2 different areas within the county. One of them was on the same road that this little male was caught on. And so I'm just waiting for his eggs to hatch, and I'll be able to get ones. And I could have gotten some from the other clutch that was from 20 miles north, but I want the ones from the same road. I want them from right in the same area. So I'll get a couple babies to raise up to go with him. And I've got another locality. I've got a male red rat from up in the mountains in North Carolina that my buddy cruised up last fall for me, and I've been hanging on to it. And it's from 2 counties over from where I already have stock from that a buddy had established some great animals in the South Mountain, Cleveland County area. But this population is really isolated off within a mountain range, a little Sandhills locality that he's doing some work in, and he just cruises. It looks like. I'll know for sure next week. It looks like he cruised a little baby female for me, so I'm hoping to establish a new locality of montane red rat snakes in the years to come. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
But always working on those little things. I've still got several other localities of rat snakes in particular that I really want to get my hands on, but it's just a matter of making field trips happen and then ultimately being productive at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have empty tubs always ready to go with the amount of herping you do?
No, I do a lot of, honestly, this year I haven't herped a lot. No, most of my herping honestly isn't collecting oriented. Most of my herping is going out with friends and salamander hunting more times than not. And so it's just out taking pictures and having a good time. This year, the few trips due to work, I didn't get out as much. Pretty much haven't gotten out locally almost at all this year. But a few focal trips this year to different areas like South Florida and Panhandle of Florida a couple times, and Big Bend area, particularly Dixie, Levy County areas. Just love that area. And then back home, visiting folks, I worked pretty hard while I was down there over short weekends. And so I try to make those little opportunities as productive as possible when I get those chances to go. And I'll be going herping next week, but I don't know. Most of it will be salamander hunting up in the Appalachians. The one night when I'll go over to North Carolina to meet my other buddy over there, we'll probably do a little cruising in that one area where the corn snakes come from. And, you know, whether we find anything or not, who knows? But you know, good times, just hanging out with friends and taking pictures of stuff, and you know, going into different habitats and stuff. That's, you know, I think hopefully my trip next weekend will be mostly fly fishing if I can make it happen. Got rained out last trip this spring, so you know, try to make fly fishing in the mountains a little bit more reality now in the fall without bad weather.
Now it seems like you just want to be outside at all costs, you know, whatever happens.
Yeah. I prefer to be outside and try to as often as possible. You know, life kind of gets in the way of, you know, that as much as it can. You know, having to go to work and pay bills and all those good things. You know, they kind of thwart.
That's always
some of
trying to
efforts.
keep it caged up, man.
Absolutely. But you know, I try to. My buddies and I all try to, you know, get together as all our schedules allow, and we get out and enjoy some good field time and stuff. Some of the trips are hard, brief trips. It's like, all right, I got like 36 hours this weekend. All right, let's make it happen. You know, no sleep, constantly going, you know, delirious driving, you know, out hiking around in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere, those sort of things. You know, it's, you know, horrible when it's happening to some extent, but you know, good memories when you're done with the whole situation, and you actually get good showers and meals when you're done with it all. So, you know, it's all good.
Now, when you are collecting animals or taking wild-caught animals, like what are some considerations, whether it be, you know, like Brandon in the chat mentioned, do you see any things like the fungal disease in snakes, or are you worried about parasites?
Parasites are there. I mean, parasites are definitely they're a constant in wild animals in various degrees, and because I like water snakes and have a little affinity for garters as well, you have a higher prevalence of those because of food sources with those guys. Not as many parasites tend to transfer from warm-blooded mammals to cold-blooded reptiles, where, you know, a lot of the rat snakes and stuff would. But in water snakes and stuff, their frogs and fish are great vectors for parasites, and so that's always you know, a challenge with those guys. I have still not yet, in all my time in the field, have not come across any animals that I was suspect of any of the SFD symptoms so far. But, you know, more of those cases seem to be prevalent up north, where denning is a bigger thing than we experience down here in the south. So whether some of that issue is more prevalent because of those cohab, you know, wintertime situations or not, it's hard to say. It's still early in the learning process.
So would you stay away from those areas that you know?
Or yeah, I mean, if you knew, you know, I'm sure if you knew areas, you know, were having issues, you know, it certainly would be. But at this time, still, we don't know a lot about that at this moment. You know, there's lots of guessing and assumptions and all that kind of stuff, but there's still a lot of study going on with that stuff, and as to how and why and that stuff exists and transmits and affects and all that kind of stuff. That it's, I tend to worry more about getting an animal from somebody's private collection and getting crypto than I worry about, you know, parasites are pretty easy to deal with as long as you can get an animal eating and established. SFD is not something I've come across as of yet. I know plenty of people show pictures where they have come across suspect animals or swabbed animals, and they've come up with them. whether they're targeting them, looking for that particular situation and doing field work with it, or, just by chance, encounters and stuff. It's obviously a concern on the horizon for everybody, but at the same time, there's some pretty bad threats in, people's private collections as well, with crypto being a big one, because that's a real silent killer. Slips in quietly. Unless you're doing the right disinfecting protocols, you're not doing anything for it. And it slowly affects animals over time. And so there's a lot of infecting other animals that can go on if you're not taking the right steps to not let that happen, so to speak. Everybody's quarantining protocols and disinfecting and parasitizing protocols are different, for all of their different reasons and experiences and stuff like that. I have more concerns when I'm getting an animal from somebody else, from their private collection, than I do worry about. I prefer to actually go collect my own stock, and that's why I do it more times than not. Is I go collect my own stock because I know where I got it, and I know it hasn't been in some captive septic dealer's hands or somebody's collection that has a questionable disinfection protocol. It's that sort of thing. So there's the more virulent stuff is actually in the captive collections.
I love that you're more wary of captive born bred than the wild.
Absolutely, 100%, much more worried about getting something from somebody else's collection. That's why I prefer to get my own stock and selectively get stuff from other people because of that reason right there.
I think
crypto's bad, man. Crypto's bad.
Yeah, that makes me want to stay with, because I mean, we haven't really bought any new snakes as far as corn snakes go. As far as things that we could bring in crypto,
gotta love the significant other's response right there. Yeah, excuse me.
Well, we bought we bought other things.
6 months ago or 8 months ago, we had 0 king snakes. How many do we have now? What are you talking about?
Yeah, but that's different. I'm talking about particularly in the corns.
Oh, okay. You should have said that.
Getting corns and getting kings is totally different.
Yeah,
completely different situation. One's gonna bite you all day long, and one isn't. It's completely different.
Yeah, I love the king snakes, but the fact that people think that those are a great pet animal, dude, they bite you fucking constantly. Or
especially the babies.
The ones that don't bite me shit on me. So
yeah. King snakes to me are I don't know if maybe garters are worse than kings to me, just because they're flighty and crappers and stuff like that. But man, kings, I get tired of getting bit by king snakes. Some of the ones that I've parted with over the past year, I'm kind of glad I'm not working with them. I say that as I over the next probably 2 years, I'll be adding multiple localities of Florida kings and stuff like that. But it gets tiresome getting bit by those king snakes.
Dude,
every time you open a door, man, they're expecting to be fed, and they're not going to back down.
I think that's the exception, though. At least what I found is that my Brookside and then the Florida Kings seem to be more chill than, say, my Cali Kings, at least so far. Definitely. In a small sample size.
Yeah, that sounds pretty small, because my Florida Kings will eat me alive. And the Cal Kings that I had, they would eat me alive too. They don't really care. They're not selective. If you're opening the cage and you're warm, you're getting bit. And you're going to try to be swallowed. That's pretty much it. You better put them out. There better be a rodent between you and that animal to get in their mouth first.
I like the fact that they're a little nonchalant about it. The corns and the other colubrids, most of them are very striky, bitey, fast. The king snakes, will just straight up grab your hand and never let go. I think it's more gingerly done, and it's less intimidating. And then you're just like, oh, okay, shit. Now this is stuck in my hand for a certain period of time. Yeah.
And then you're going to have bloody handprints on the rest of the cages as you go through your process. This is over the next couple hours of cleaning and feeding. I don't know. My water snakes don't do that, man. So, and I think it's great. And most of my rat snakes just hiss at me or do bluffing hisses at me. So I tend to appreciate that a little bit more than my kings. But I have a childhood, I guess a childhood fascination with Florida kings. So I'm kind of going to stick with doing the some Florida localities, and I've got two or three localities I'm playing with right now. So I can't keep a lot of the others because we have 2/3 king snakes here in the state, and 2 are protected, and the other they can't decide if it's related to the other one at this point or not, as taxonomy changes keep happening. So I have limited ability to keep some of the king snakes, here in this state. I can work with some of the splenitas and stuff out farther west, and the cow kings and stuff, but all the easterns and the whole speckled eastern black complex situation with the taxonomy changes and talk of it going back. Right now, the state just keeps all that stuff as a no-go for the most part. So just unfortunately, I catch the most gorgeous eastern black / speckled kings in my own yard, but it's a couple quick pictures and send it back into the garden situation. So
Yeah, I need to get me some of those speckled and easterns. Gotta get me some of those.
Get me.
So
yeah, I love the speckles and the eastern blacks, but it's just until they figure out how they're going to settle things, here in the state regulatory wise, it's just I'll just stick with my Florida kings that I grew up fascinated with as a little kid.
Yeah. Now, I still can't get over the fact that you find that your water snakes are more handleable than, say, a king snake, or
they're way more handleable.
Is it an age thing? Do they start off terrible and then they get good, or?
I think just the initial irascibility on let's say a wild caught animal, it doesn't last long. Like as soon as you start getting them to eat, it just goes away. Like I never get bit by my water snakes ever. Some of the babies from certain localities are a little spunkier, shyer than others. But on the whole, like I never get bit by my water snakes. I get bit by king snakes every time. And I get bluff strikes by various rat snakes, depending on if they're, it really doesn't matter whether they're captive ones or not. Some of my captive, generations ones are pretty spunky too. So it just varies depending on the different animals. But yeah, my waters are by far the more laid back, particularly all my bandits and mangroves. Mangroves naturally in the wild, that's one of because they integrate well, depending on which taxonomy you call it, hybrid or integrate or whatever. They used to be considered subspecies of bandits, and now they're their own species and whatever. But that's one of the ways, I have a friend that does field research with them, that's one of the ways they can tell if it's got fasciata integrate with it, is if it bites you, it's got some bandit blood in it, and if it doesn't bite you, it's a pure mangrove. I mean, aside from other things, it's a quick reference because the bandit tends to throw a little more irascible temperament as a wild caught animal. But honestly, I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many banded water snakes between Southerns and Floridas that I have, and as adults, much less babies. And they never bite me. And I never get bites from them, ever.
Well, I still don't believe you, so we may have to get a pair of red mangroves in order to prove your case. So we can
mangroves definitely are more so than the others. But honestly, yeah, you need to get some Nerodia in your hands and realize how cool they are. I'm growing some big fans out there with people being able to, feed them easier and to have success with them. I think that's a lot of the issue historically with Nerodia is that people are keeping them wrong and having to deal with fish and frogs and all that kind of things. And I got exposed to working with them. I never kept them as a kid. I was always catching them as a kid. But while working in the zoo field and keeping native species on exhibits, I was in a position to work with primarily plain bellies and yellow bellies from this area and midlands and stuff. And because of trying to maintain those and do exhibit animals with them and mixed species exhibits, I got a taste of trial and erroring with keeping Nerodia. When we decided to kind of get back into keeping something after a good few year break and going this route, it didn't take a whole lot for me to kind of quickly go directly to the rodent route because the garter snake crowd all does it. I mean, they all feed rodents, as a primary diet, and the diet between Nerodia and Thamnophis isn't that different on the grand scheme. They're all pretty much all rodent and fish eaters with, Thamnophis obviously going a little on earthworms and stuff like that more as babies, but their diets are all very similar in general, with only a handful of them really being much of rodent feeders in the wild. Some are, but it's and the few folks that maybe tried Nerodia and doing and anthams, I guess, too, started having trouble with them with fur and having impactions and stuff like that. So I know a lot of people that do still feed furred rodents and don't have a problem with it, but I've known many people that have, and so and hognose guys as well. So I just went right to just doing hairless, and everything's been fine. Haven't had any issues at all. So it's been definitely the right route to go, and has gotten a lot more people interested in keeping them, and especially with me being able to offer some reasonably attractive looking animals. I've been pretty fortunate in my field time to most of the time come up with a pair at a given spot, maybe not even seeing another single animal, but a pair, and been fortunate enough to really get some pretty nice looking animals at these different spots, especially when I've only found a single pair at those spots. So it's been pretty lucky, and I think that's been helpful in getting people interested in appreciating rodeo on the whole. They're cool animals, man. They're great animals.
Yeah, we need someone out there telling people that, because I don't know if anyone knows.
Right. I mean, I can see, there's a lot of species out there, that aren't worked with much in captivity, but a lot of those guys are a lot smaller, and then their diets are a lot harder to mimic. A lot of the smaller snakes and ringnecks and all those guys. And there's some people dabble in them, but Nerodia are pretty big animals. Right up in there with the king snakes and rat snakes for the most part. And so there's really, no reason why people shouldn't be working with them. It's just a matter of, as with other things that people work with, overcoming the hurdles of understanding what it takes to keep them. And some of the species in Nerodia don't do well in captivity. And I've struggled with them, and I am throwing my hands up with some of them. Greens are a big challenge for a lot of people. Either of the greens, and they don't do great in captivity. And I've heard of some repeated good successes with animals over in Europe, but there's not really a lot of people that have had success long-term keeping and much less breeding them here in the country. We've been, a couple of us have been trying on and off, but I live just kind of enough out of range that getting my hands on fresh stock isn't always the easiest thing in the world. And most of the ones that I unfortunately came across this past year were all while I was down in the national park, so it was just a couple quick photos and short videos of them. So it's a much desired species. I get a lot of people, particularly overseas, that want Florida greens or Mississippi greens, and it's like, yeah, me too, guys. So that's I can't offer them any. I can offer you plenty of bandits, though. Got lots of those.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a question?
Well, I was gonna say we're running low on time, so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask.
question?
I'm not sure if you mentioned this name before, but our friend Gustavo lives in Florida, and he was asking if you know Decker from Florida, because he works with Nerodia.
Decker, is that a person's first name? I don't
Yeah,
assuming
he's
it's
kind of
a
like
last
Madonna.
name.
He goes by one name, or
I'm
Elvis.
assuming it's a last
I don't know.
name.
Maybe he's just a symbol like Prince or something. I don't know. The name does not ring a bell. I do know of that name of somebody from years ago that was more of a rat snake guy and stuff. But
Last name, he says.
but not in the case certainly of Nerodia. I don't know anybody that goes that name, first name or last name for that matter.
He says John Decker.
Oh, I do know of don't know, but I know of a John Decker from years ago down in the South Florida area. He was very well known for Decker's rats and rosy rats and all that kind of stuff down in the south part of the state. And if he's working with Nerodia, I'm not familiar with that because I don't know the guy. I just know him by reputation, but not in a bad way, but just know of the guy.
Him.
There's those guys where it's like they have a line of something, and it's like I don't know who this guy is, but there's this line of it. A snake, so it's like I know that guy exists out there.
Yeah,
like,
there was a guy years ago working with a lot of locality stuff of rat snakes from out of the South Florida localities back when everybody was just cared about morphs and stuff. And it may be the same guy. I don't know. I don't really hear much of him these days, but everything's social media these days, and a lot of those older guys don't care to be on social media. So that may be the case. So I don't know. Most Nerodia guys, we tend to interact with each other in some capacity, but I've met a few neurodia guys that, they just play around with some. Yeah, they don't want to be on social media. They don't want to interact with people and, that sort of thing. And they're like, why are you doing it this way? You should be doing it this way. You're missing out on this. Like lingual luring, mangrove water snakes. They actually do cottonmouths and copperheads, but they do it with their tongue. Well, because of the way I keep and feed my animals, I don't get to appreciate that because my animals aren't hunting live fish. Well, live fish transmit parasites. Most commercially available stuff is thiaminase deficient, and so it's not healthy to feed them. All those sorts of things. So
you're okay with missing out?
It's okay. I'll have to do without. For the sake of getting to enjoy these guys safely. I can, and if I need it too bad enough, I can, go buy some mollies or something and guppies and throw them in a tank and appreciate it if I'm so inclined to do so. But I've seen video of it. I know what it is, so it's all right.
So unfortunately, we've kept you past your time. But if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they find you or reach out to you?
Probably the easiest way is the Facebook page that I have for my herps, which is Darkhorse Herpetoculture on Facebook. You can message me through there and contact me that way. That's probably the most prominent way to get in touch with me. And try to be as helpful as I can. That's all I can do. I don't know it all. I don't know a lot. I know a little bit. I try to help people out where I can and share what I enjoy working with. So that's probably the best route. Just hit up my Facebook page and get in touch with me that way.
For sure. And if you're ever looking for, just a lot of people that I know will randomly post up something and I'm like, I really, really like that. Or, it's a random thing like a fox snake or Slowinski and you're tagged in it and they got it from you. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And then here we go.
Yeah, fox snakes, man. I've got 3 localities of fox snakes now.
That's how it happens.
And yeah, it happens. It's like, what? You got? Okay, I got to have some. What's it going to take? Make it work. That's all I can do.
Yeah, so just look through his page and be like, I didn't know that existed until right now. That's one of those things. I didn't know
fox snakes existed till right now. I never heard of them.
And because taxonomy changes recently, it's all up in the air now. There's different kinds, and and some states you can get them from, other states you can't get them from. And so it's a bit of a game trying to get what you want to work with. So, but hopefully we'll start having more baby fox snakes available for everybody to enjoy starting next year. We only had a couple of males available to surplus this year, but hoping to have 2, maybe 3 localities next year if things go well. Who knows?
For sure. They're really cool snakes. Now, if you want to reach us,
you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Port City Pythons. You can go to our website at portcitypythons.com, which we have snakes available. You can email us at theportcitypythons@gmail.com. You can see us at the Reptile Super Show,
Oaks, Pennsylvania,
November 10th.
If you want to see some corn snakes and deli cups,
you can see this beautiful face this weekend in Chicago.
That's up to the person who's looking at it. I guess it's up to.
Okay, weirdo.
This is how our outros turn into long.
And anything else? We will see you.
No, that's it.
We will see you next Monday. Joe will be exhausted from coming back from Tinley.
Yeah, I think next week's show we actually scheduled for Tuesday, so I think we may be a little bit safe.
Won't be so exhausted.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind. Thank you everyone for watching and listening, and we will see you next week. And thank you for coming on again.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely.